Hey, Good News family. This is Tana Heineman, the host of our Now What podcast. Our desire is to walk alongside you as we grow together in our understanding of God and His Word. Each week, we get to unpack the message with our pastors as well as everyday people in our church family and help answer the question, now what do I do with what I just heard? We love that you're here with us, and we hope you're challenged and encouraged as together we unpack Sunday's message.
Hello, Good News family. Thank you for joining us today. I'm filling in for Tana. If you don't know me, my name's Sarah. I'm like second string podcast host, which is totally fine.
I'm filling in for Sarah. I am on most of it.
I am joined by one of my all-time favorite pastors, which can we talk about that really quick?
Like top 15.
This is Pastor Greg. He's pretty great. Don't tell him I said that.
That's what I tell people.
We have a Sunday morning team meeting that we call Huddle. It's before our service. And a lot of times I will lead that meeting. And whenever I introduce the speaker, it's most of the time one of our pastors. And so I will say, and now we have one of my all-time favorite pastors speaking this morning, and I'll say who it is. And I feel like I got some attitude from you about it when you preached last weekend.
Yeah, because I'm right.
But I don't, like, you guys are some of my all-time, so it's like, I don't know why that makes you angry.
It's, let's see, how could I?
Because like you, PJ, Pastor Raphael, you guys, Pastor Isaiah, like someone like me, you guys are like my all-time favorites.
Yeah.
It's meant to be encouraging, and it's sincere, but you're like, oh, Sarah
all
always
the
has
pastors
that.
you've known.
Yeah. Listen,
So we're in the top 15.
I've known, 100%. I've known some doozies. Don't forget
Right,
where I
it doesn't
came
mean
from.
we're in the top 3.
No, I'm telling you, you are.
Well, you're saying
like
that now.
lifelong
but-
Christian.
Yeah, and yeah, so, but did you tell that to other people?
No,
Are you just handing out these
No,
compliments so they'll
no.
lack any value?
no, because I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
I like to. I'm real. I keep it real, and I don't just like willy-nilly say things.
I wonder where that came from, willy-nilly.
I don't know. We can't get off on that tangent right now. But what I'm saying is, I mean when I say that.
Do you
And
think
you guys
we
all
could
act
get
like, "Oh, Sarah,
a show producer? I mean, we have them, but we need like those podcasts where we're like come up with a random thing and we're like, "Hey, Josh, look this up," and then he tells us, "Yeah,
I mean, maybe
yeah,
Josh he probably has time for it.
yeah."
Well, put it in the show notes. We'll talk about it later.
So
Okay,
I think
so
we're starting off strong.
yeah, always. Tana is gone today. Don't tell her this either, but I have paper notes because I'm old school and I like to feel and touch and move. So
Is she one
hopefully
of your favorite podcasters?
Tana is one of my best friends. We've talked about this before. I have a group of best friends, and she is in that group.
Okay.
You disagree because you think you can only have one best friend.
Maybe I'm sad inside. Maybe it's coming out as
Because you're not in that group?
no, because I don't have that. Maybe it's a reflection of my own. Maybe I'm lashing out
Maybe.
because of my inner pain.
I mean, we can talk through that on another podcast.
Okay.
But today we're going to talk about
do inner-
anger.
So anger today, inner pain.
Next week.
Okay.
Tune in next week.
Am I helping?
Totally.
Good.
So Pastor Jason spoke on James
Yeah.
1:19 through 21. We're still in our James series, which love, by the way.
Oh, pause. I have a cold.
Oh.
Like some awful human donated their germs to me. And so you're welcome. My voice and random snot.
It's fine.
Yeah.
I didn't notice. I'm sure our listeners didn't either, but thank you for letting me know.
Absolutely.
I should have a screen up so I don't get your germs, but
Yeah.
we've talked about this also. Like, I have a great immune system because I eat food from my gas station regularly, so
You
it
also
just
have
builds
you have kids.
I do.
And so
A million of them.
children are petri dishes. for
Absolutely.
germs.
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
As long as they're going
I
to
had
school.
one in the urgent care on Friday, so
Really?
yep.
Did you put it?
She's
Him-
fine.
her
It's
there?
her. Yeah.
Is she mouthing off?
Yep. So I said, I acted out of anger. Just kidding. No, that wasn't it at all. Guys, don't call the server CPS. We're fine. Anyways, so Pastor Jason continued our James series, and yesterday he spoke on anger. And the verse that he pulled from was James 1:19-21. It says this: "Understand this, my dear brothers and sisters. Let every person be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. For human anger does not accomplish God's righteousness. So put away all filth and evil excess, and humbly welcome the message implanted within you, which is able to save your souls."
Nice.
Yeah, I love that. Do you consider yourself an angry person?
I don't want to.
Yeah. I try not to be.
Yeah, maybe TMI. I attribute it to growing up and feeling powerless, I think.
Yeah.
And became my way of expressing frustration, almost everything. So
I appreciate what he had said yesterday about maybe if it would be different forms of anger, because sometimes it's frustration or irritation. Maybe that's a more descriptive form of anger. But I also like how he addressed the fact that anger is an emotion. So it's not necessarily having that emotion is the problem. It's how you respond to it. And
it may not be a primary emotion either. I can't remember. I don't know if you talked about this. I was sick yesterday. So. But anger, I think, is a secondary,
right,
like the result of something else. And so sitting with it, and if you're curious, and trying to take your time.
I actually wrote that down because I feel like most of the time it's I'm angry because I'm scared.
Yeah.
I'm angry because I'm confused. And so even we've been doing a parenting class on Wednesday nights. Shout out to the parenting class. If you're interested, please join us. But a lot of times, even in interactions with my kids or my spouse, or if you with your spouse, I have to pause and think, what is actually wrong? Like, what is actually the problem?
Exactly.
Why am I angry? Is it because I don't have all the information? Is it because I'm confused? Is it because I'm scared? But I wanted to ask your perspective on when is it okay to be angry? Because I don't want people to get the message that I'm angry and I just need to stop being angry. So anger is an emotion given by God. And in my opinion, sometimes it's justified. And so what are reasons, or how can we, come to understand why we have anger?
Yeah. Going big out of the gate.
Jumping right in.
Right. Just off the top of my head, I would begin with, and I genuinely think this is part of the answer. I don't want to be angry. At this stage of my life, I've recognized that when I'm angry, I can do damage to things. I rarely, there's an idea called catharsis, that if you express something, it lets it go, like you're letting air out of a balloon.
Okay.
And I don't know how valid that concept is. Like if you go somewhere, if you're able to express these deep emotions, I actually think they increase. I think you create more of an appetite and greater capacity for them. And that doesn't, I don't want to act like that's 100%. I'm sure there are situations where expressing what you're feeling in the moment without then dwelling on it is probably, there are times when that's healthy. But I think it's the dwelling on it, never actually releasing whatever it is or figuring out whatever is going on. I found that the path through, which is a different question, I'll come back to, path through for me is identifying why. So when is it okay to be angry? So beginning with, I don't ever want to be. So I'm not looking for ways to justify. I'm looking for a situation, or I'm trying to pay attention to, are there situations where anger is the correct response, not the justified, can I get away with this, or however else you want to phrase it. Meaning sometimes we're reacting to our reaction and justify it. So, well, they made me mad. Excuse me for disagreeing with you. You got mad. Whatever it was, you may not recognize your choice, but it was a choice. It may happen so fast that you didn't recognize it. So when is that choice valid? Or not valid, but the correct one. This won't be 100% answer, meaning don't always hold me to it. I think of categories like, do you see innocence being violated?
Mm-hmm.
Do you see justice being violated? And justice is a narrow category. It's not anything you disagree with. We're talking from Bible kind of point of view. So justice would end up being, an example would be, you see somebody who doesn't have a voice, a right, the ability to stand up for themselves, and somebody who is stronger coming in and doing so. So a simple one would be bullying. Is there a justifiable anger in response to that? Yeah. And so I think maybe I'll think of other categories, but those seem to be the main ones. There's ones that we also naturally respond with anger. And I don't know that I'd put them at the top of it's okay to be angry. No, I think sometimes we are angry. If a random person comes by and punches me in the face, right. I may respond with anger, right? And to some degree, might be the correct response and stuff. What am I going to do with that is a follow-up question to anger. So anger doesn't need to assume damage to others, but it can be really valuable if it creates a response where a response is needed.
I'm glad you said that, because I want people to understand, like I mentioned a little bit ago, anger is an emotion given by, designed by God, where He designed us. And so some of the time, anger can bring about change for the good. So you mentioned, I also have belief is my number one strength, if you're into Strength Finders. And so I understand, we talk a lot about self-awareness and understanding how God designed you. If you've been through For Purpose, we talk about that a lot, and just being aware. And so I have to keep that in mind, that I have as my number one belief, I have strong opinions about how you should do things, how everyone should do things. And so sometimes when people don't do things the way I think they should, I can get angry. Now, I'm not talking about necessarily, I think I'm in a place of a little bit more maturity, where if I'm like, oh, this is how you want to raise your kids, and this is how I'm raising my kids, and it's both, biblically sound or whatever, that's one thing. But if I see you hurting a child or abusing someone, you talked about bullying, or the marginalized, things like that, anger can lead to positive change. So I don't want anyone to feel like, I'm angry, I just need to shove it down and ignore it, because sometimes it can be used, to make us aware of something that needs to change. So I thought that was, I really appreciated how he talked about it as it's an emotion. Yeah. So one of the points that, and taking it straight from the verse, it says, James says, be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. And I was thinking about being quick to listen and slow to speak. I was thinking about that. What does that mean? Because I feel like sometimes if we do the opposite of that, that's when we get into trouble. Like if we assume, if we're not quick to listen and we jump to conclusions, or if we aren't slow to speak and we shoot our mouth off, which I am guilty of. Surprise, surprise. That can lead us, because we're angry, that can lead to more destruction. But how, when he says slow to anger, what does that look like?
Yeah, that's great. I think being slow with that would dissipate most of it.
Okay.
Like it's going to go away if you have to genuinely listen. So this involves not just you noticed that something was being said or done, but genuinely allowing whatever information could come in and taking the time to process it. Many of my anger failures have been quick to listen and not listening and assuming. It's been assuming based, well, this, you said this, therefore you meant this.
And that's a good point.
And so then I get mad because you definitely meant that. And then I find out, oh, wait a minute, you actually, that email wasn't to me. Or so, I don't know, something silly, but I got all worked up. Now you could also go, well, I'm being slow to anger, but what you're doing is, he mentioned fret. I heard him talking about that, but you're actually just fretting or dwelling or living in a frustrated state, having never recognized why, or asked, why am I actually frustrated, or why am I angry? Why am I becoming angry? Or am. And so that decision ahead of time to go, I'm going to try and make my anger slow, and not so that you can be more devious either. This is a slow burn. Listen, you're not doing barbecue here. Low and slow is good. But the ideal is that you figure out and you hear what is actually going on. And sometimes the correct response will be one that is anger with awareness, that this can no longer happen. This would be, there's times at parenting when you might win a parenting award when you don't react, but instead you go, no, what you just did was serious enough that we're going to do a sit down and we're going to have a slow conversation because you need to understand something, versus some parent reaction or something. So
I loved how he also, he gave us some practical ways, and looking through my notes here, the example that Pastor Jason used was he has a 24-hour rule when it comes to like an email. I think he used email specifically, but I would say even a conversation. So I have kids that play youth sports, which if all my parents out there who are in the world of youth sports, it can make you angry for a lot of different reasons. We had a conversation about it this morning, but one of the rules that the coaches have is the 24-hour rule, where if something happens at a tournament or a game, it's best to wait 24 hours and then talk through it. And I love that because I have high emotions. I'm a big feeler. So I feel the feelings of others. It's a blessing and a curse. And so when my emotions are high, I am ready to throw down. I am ready to just fight. But I loved how he talked about that because so often, let me back up. When I'm in an argument with my husband, sometimes I tell him, I just need to be mad. Like, just let me be mad. Because so many times I will go to bed and then I'll wake up and I'll be like, yeah, that's really not worth being mad about. But it's something about, and I don't know if it's a female versus male. He talked a little bit about that. But sometimes I just have to feel it to get through it. So some of the things that he talked about was waiting 24 hours, taking deep breaths, taking a walk. Pastor Raphael and I were talking this morning about when we're at a game or something and, we might need to step away for a second because those emotions are running high. But I didn't know if you had anything else to add or, Pastor Jason even mentioned like asking yourself, why is this making me so angry? Is there truth to what they're saying? And that's a hard conversation even to have with yourself of, when somebody's coming at you with, I don't know if I would say accusations, but statements, sometimes the truth does hurt and you have to look at it and say, am I acting this way? Is this true about me? And then maybe you're angry at first. But that anger, it can eventually bring about good change.
Yeah, everything can be divided up and often needs to be. If I come at you aggressively, and your response is anger, it's a protection response. Or for some, it might be shy away. It's a protection response to someone coming in a little too hot into that conversation. Now, once that is dealt with or resolved, or however you want to think about it, or recognize it exists, or whatever happens, to then be able to switch to what is the content of what is going on. What are we actually talking about? One of the best advice that I can give to married couples is, in arguments or discussions or however you want to phrase it, is stay on topic. we've maybe you haven't, but most of us who've thought about it, you've heard, don't say never, don't say always.
Right.
These giant words aren't helping the conversation. You always do.
I'm guilty of that.
Literally everywhere
I'm
else,
guilty of that.
throw away.
When I'm in a place of like, then it's like, and no one never cleans up. I'm always the one who has to. I think that's a good point. Yeah.
So recognizing it, but if we're going slow, then when it's time, because it might be getting separate so that you can get to the place, what is the content, the actual content of what this issue is, whatever is being brought in front of me. And different things will tick different ones of us off about different things. And I personally find that things I get kind of wound up about, I either feel personally threatened in some way, which is very frustrating because it almost always points back to childhood. Something that I'm still carrying and haven't, and it popped up. And so my response is, I'm going to get you before you get me. Or it's an idea, and this may be unique to me, I don't know, but it's an idea that I haven't come to, I'm not satisfied with whatever my current answers are, or I don't feel like I have enough information. So in a weird way, I feel insecure. So maybe not in a weird way, we all feel insecure. I'm reacting in a certain thing because I feel like I should have all these ideas locked down, but I don't. And I'm frustrated with other things that I'm seeing there. And so I react negatively. I don't know if you remember, but it was might have been 2 years ago. I just walked in the door of the office, and Tana and Bib and someone else was just discussing something. And that topic, I just snapped and just went off.
I'm laughing because I do remember that.
Do you? Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Sitting there with my coffee like, okay, here we go.
Yeah. I came in hot, ready to go. And I wasn't mad before walking in. It was that topic. And there's definite things that still frustrate me about the topic, but it had nothing to do with the people there. But I did damage to the relationship between me and Tana. She and I actually had to sit down because she actually went and talked to Pastor Raphael, rightfully so. This isn't, I'm not telling on her. I'm saying because I was that wrong, not in my ideas, in how I acted and how I acted just out of the blue. And so to me, that apologize and everything else, but it means I still need work. There's stuff that I want to continue to pay attention to and need to pay attention to, so that, especially for me, while I'm processing ideas, I don't go around just punching people.
Well, Pastor Jason mentioned that some of our transformation will take work on our part. And I will affirm you because I do remember that. And you did the right thing. You went back and you apologized and made peace and all those kind of things. But what were we just talking about? I was going to say, I think sometimes that piece of being slow to anger, I appreciate also because it de-escalates a situation. So if you both are coming in hot, that's just like, an explosion waiting to happen. Whereas if you come in with the mindset of I'm going to be slow to anger and I'm going to, there's a sense of like a humbleness about it of like, I'm reminding myself that I might not have all the information. I might be jumping to conclusions. Let me hear them out. Maybe they have not an excuse, but an explanation of, oh, I'm so sorry. When I heard that and it instantly brought me back to my childhood and it was this situation and I'm so sorry. It diffuses the situation in my opinion. So I loved how he...
I think really being aware of that doesn't mean you need to tell everybody, well, these are my childhood traumas.
Sure.
But and it goes, you can go, I was wrong. And the sooner you can get to I was wrong, I think the better. Even if you don't have it realized out, about why, I'm just a huge fan of taking responsibility for the things that we've chosen to do, rather than pass them off as, well, I was mad. I was mad is not an excuse.
There was a situation.
Well, it is an excuse. It's not a good.
It's not a good one. Several years ago, where Jake and I were He was working at a church, and we were transitioning out, and it was like close to the end of our time there, and I was angry about a lot of the ways that we had been treated. And I remember praying and, to telling the Lord how unfair we had been treated and how horrible these people have been to us. And I feel like the Holy Spirit convicted me of, okay, if 99% of the problem is these people, but you're still 1%, you need to take ownership of that 1%. And I was like, oh, yeah, I guess you're right. And that's not always easy.
No.
Because it's humbling, but I love what you said about taking responsibility. Even when you're angry, like, it doesn't matter. You still can't act that way.
Well, you have what you're talking about in my mind is there's a violation from your point of view of justice.
Yeah.
What should be done wasn't done. And in matter of fact, was almost the opposite might have been done, or counter justice was being done. And now you can become a renegade where you're like, I'm going to solve this for a future and everything else. And you feel utterly justified because justice, what we just talked about, it's okay to be angry if justice has been violated. But your assessment of justice is only going to be, it's going to be stronger if you will accept that you violate, that you as in each individual also violates justice.
Sure.
Right? What role did I have in this? This is a thin line to walk when you're trying to also be emotionally stable, because you don't, there's a way for at least a part of my life, and I think still residual there, my solution to the things that I felt were unjust was to take all responsibility. And so that meaning I am going to claim control. Even if they were wrong, I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to go, what do I have control of? The end result, it is a response. It is a survival response. But there's a point in my life where it stopped. It started being more of a hindrance to my growth and me moving on than when I no longer needed the protection it provided. It became a damaging thing. So it's more a little deeper than that. But what you're responding to then, or we're responding to and often do, is a sense of this is what is right. This is how it should be done. And so anger comes up, and there's that, this is true and good and everything else. And so am I righteously indignant and stuff, is our fun little phrase. Yes, but because you won't deal with your stuff, you've lost your moral high ground. So
I'm glad that you said that, because I want you to talk about that a little bit. So I was thinking about it. He referenced righteous indignation, and if you could kind of define that for us. And then I was thinking through, we look at Jesus as our example. So did Jesus ever deal with anger? How did he respond? And one of the examples that was brought to me by someone in my family was when Jesus was in the market, in the temple, and he pushed over all the tables and said, "My house shall be a house of prayer." And to most people reading that, just reading it, not out of context, but just reading the story, they think, oh my gosh, look, I am justified in damaging others' property and yelling at people because Jesus did it. So can you articulate to our listeners what that story actually represented? Because I think it's important, because like I said, we look at Jesus and a lot of people will take that example and be like, oh, I'm allowed to act a fool because Jesus did it. And they might justify, they won't use those words, but that's what they'll do. In reality, they're not at all, they totally misunderstood that story.
Yeah, definitely possibly. Interesting. First off, let's start with this. Have you ever seen the AI created image of Jesus flipping over tables?
No, but it sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's Jesus
We'll have to
doing
Google
the
that.
backflip over there. Because AI just,
That's what, okay. AI
isn't that
just takes
awesome?
it literally.
Yeah, I thought that was funny.
Gonna have
Anyway,
to chat GPT that later.
do it. Create image of Jesus flipping over tables. That'd be great. That's it.
We'll put it in the show notes, guys.
Stuff. Yeah, a link.
We'll link it, yeah.
Here you go.
Check our Instagram for more.
It's great. Yeah, Autumn, can you put that out?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll take care of it for us.
She's not listening. She doesn't know. She's like, oh, you're still here? Anyway, just to lighten up a little bit.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll bring you back to that in just a minute. I'm going to do a round. I'm going to bring a Bible story in to talk about anger and then the de-escalation, because
Okay.
you mentioned that. And then we'll come back to righteous indignation and that kind of what I think is a thin line. It's I don't think the path is as wide as we may want it to be.
And I don't want to jump, but like
You're great.
there's a book that's been recommended to me, and I'm not going to name it because we'll get emails about, some people will be like, that's the worst book, and some people say that's the best book I've ever read. But the premise of the book is and I haven't read it, to be fair, but it's like, don't be angry. And I'm like, we should be angry about some things. Like some things, injustice, I think about children who are abused or molested, or like that makes me angry.
Yeah.
When I see people taken advantage of, that makes me angry.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And might be what it should respond. That
Right.
should be. So I don't know if you also remember we'll come to the Bible story, I promise, but just remember thinking about off of that. So you remember me saying the four loves in Greek, and that if agape, or C.S. pronounce it agape. I'm assuming he's right because he's C.S. Lewis. So,
Yeah.
And I don't.
I've always heard it as agape, but I'm not.
I don't speak
I'm not the
classical
most educated person.
yeah.
So.
Which we call the perfect love, or however you want to put that. Eros, which is should be self-evident. Then phileo, which
Brotherly.
might be called brotherly love. And the fourth one is storge.
Okay.
And I can very easily illustrate right now. Think of a puppy. That's storge.
Yes.
So I think there are elements that I think there may be parallel ideas that we go, okay, this is what that type of anger, can't really define it, but this is that kind of thing. And so I think there is a righteous thing that we just know. When it began when you were so little, and it began with the idea of fair, right? If you and I were sitting here, Josh was handing out cookies, and he gave me 2 and gave you 1, and then said, well, it's because you're tall, right? Or taller than me, right?
Yeah.
And it should be that. It should be some type of response. And we're being silly, and so you're old enough, mature, you're really old. But not just
My birthday
you're
is
mature
like
enough
coming
to
up,
process.
so don't remind me.
Yeah, 72, 71. I'm sorry.
68.
68. Good. Okay. But you're mature enough to kind of balance that. But there's that fundamental idea: is this fair? Is this and through life, hopefully relatively early, someone told you, without being mean, life isn't fair. Let's remove the expectation of fair. You can never do that. But being able to add that to the way you understand that the world is complex, not simple. And so, no, everything is not going to be fair. Are there things, though, that in the scope of fair, I don't know how to illustrate this, but in the concept of fair, that are so unfair that they're not right. And I think that what I'm trying to get to is that the fundamental idea of right, right and wrong, yes, but I think fair comes from that it begins very early. I think it's fundamental to
You just
who we
know.
are. And I'm not talking about, excuse me, should you serve red wine with fish or something silly. I'm talking about should, man, I can't even come up with one that we're so off on this. I can't even come up with an example that I should be able to come up with. Should there be in a place that the goal is to come and connect with God, should there be something on your path to connect with him that's going to charge you?
I see. Okay.
And almost everybody, if assuming we have an understanding of what we're talking about, I'm leaving it all. I'm trying to think of concrete examples, but there's it's hard to get there. But I've seen, and I want to be very careful here, homeless being fed, but only after they're given information.
Okay.
Ideally, if that happens, I as an outsider, I recognize I'm an outsider, so I don't want to speak past my knowledge. My initial impression is that food is essential. Feed them. And so, but maybe there's a message that actually is bigger than the food, and so I can comprehend that. But there's just ways that we don't believe that children should be really harmed. And I'm not talking about discipline. I think we don't believe children should be abused. And that there should be something that rises up.
It's like inherently within us.
Yes. You know that there are limits to things.
Especially children, because they're defenseless.
Yeah. Anyone, we can begin with anyone beating anyone else should give a response of, oh, violence is not the answer. Now, we then develop over time and go, violence sometimes is the answer. I agree. It never is the desired answer.
Sure.
Ever. It may have to be the answer, but we don't want that.
Right.
And for those of you who are super strong-willed and stuff, I'm not saying it should never happen. Again, I don't know how to say this more strongly. I'm saying, and I'm also not endorsing, let's make ourselves totally weak and soft. No. I'm saying we're actually on the other side where we've valued violence and aggression so much that we actually think that is the valid response to things, and then justify it by calling it righteous indignation. This way, it comes the other way. It comes, what is the correct response with this? So there's actually a movie out about this guy, Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He's in Germany before World War II, and then during World War II. He's actually ends up being killed, if I'm right, by Nazis. But he's having to figure out, how do I respond? The churches of the time, most of them are just bowing down to Hitler, which we look back and go, oh, that's a bad idea. Not according to them. They're finding ways to justify this. If I'm not, maybe oversimplification would be, I'm not being attacked, so therefore, when do I step in? And this is Bonhoeffer's, I don't know how you illustrate, but among the questions Bonhoeffer answer is, when do I step in? At what point do I essentially burn down my career? I think righteous actually affects you. It makes you take a stand that may cost you something. It may cost a relationship. I mean, the options are limitless. Some of them, it could cost you your life. Sometimes it could cost you your job. It could cost you relationship. But when there's no price, I don't know. It would be a unique situation. I'd have to hear it to see one that had no price, but I get to express. To me, there is a price. If we're going to do violence, whether physically, emotionally, intellectually, I mean, ideas can be violent. And so then I think we should know that there's a real reason behind them. So anyway, a bunch of rambling to come back to the story of David. So David is still running from Saul, he's further south in Israel, and Saul at the moment isn't pursuing him. He's not happy with David. He's still technically pursuing, but he doesn't have armies out at that moment chasing him. And so David is just trying to, he's got a bunch of people with him of all different qualities and things like that, and basically a random army of maybe probably unorganized, but they end up protecting an area of land. And in that area of land, there's a rich guy named, oh shoot, it just disappeared. I can tell you what his name means. It's not Haman, that's Ruth. It starts with an H though. It'll come. Yeah? No?
No.
Okay. Anyway.
Hold on.
Yep. It'll be a good silent. So name's just blanking on me.
There's somebody driving their car right now and they're
going,
screaming.
This,
yeah.
this.
His name.
His name. It's Bib. She's listening to it. Anyway, they're actually keeping his land and his, if they're shipping stuff out, his caravan's safe. And so what they come and ask him is, will you give us some food? You know, basically sort of pay us for what we've done.
Yep.
And the landowner's response was anger. He blows up. I would never, there's no way I'm going to help you and everything else. So do you know what David does?
I want you to share.
Thank you. Sorry. He gets this response, and he gets his guys together, and they form a war party, and they're going to go kill him. So this is just a farmer, merchant, but he's rich. I don't want to. And David's like, fine, you're going to mess with us? We're going to destroy you. We're absolutely going to completely wipe you out. And I think even David swears that this is what's going to happen by the end of the day.
Okay.
And as David, furious, is riding to go do this thing, kill this guy, the guy's wife comes out with everything that David had asked for and more.
Okay.
Her name is Abigail.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
I had that one. And her husband's name, who I can't remember at the moment, his name means fool.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so she comes out, and David stops and basically used, what's the word you used? If I'm all wound up.
Redirect.
She redirects.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And she comes to him humbly and says, I'm sorry. She doesn't, even while she's doing
slowed anger.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. But she also helps David remember who he is. Mm-hmm. And among the message, she first says, I'm sorry. She doesn't throw her husband under the bus, but he's already done that on his own.
Right.
So
he took care of that.
She just asks him, and she doesn't say necessarily, please don't kill my husband. Mm-hmm. She appeals to who David is going to be. Mm-hmm. Don't do this evil thing, because if he had, it would have defined in the same way some of the other negative things that he did. Mm-hmm. And so she stops him in his anger. Mm-hmm. He realizes it and basically thanks her. Look what you did. You slowed down my version based on this. You slowed down my anger. Mm-hmm. And he was David, still in the unjust situation. This guy should have helped out David. Mm-hmm. So still in the unjust, the justice has not been fixed. Mm-hmm. But wisdom in that situation was Abigail coming and saying, hey, let's take a breath. You're worth more than what you're getting right now.
Well, and I love that, because I will there's a phrase that I say to my kids all the time, and it's just because somebody did the wrong thing to you doesn't mean you get to do the wrong thing to them.
Exactly.
And so even though David was wronged
Yes.
and he was ready to respond in anger,
Yeah.
God used Abigail to slow that down and de-escalate. Yeah, that's a great example.
Yeah, he would have, and it genuinely would have affected a bunch of other things.
Yeah, the ripple
potentially,
effects.
yeah,
Right,
exactly.
sure. So many times our anger does have those ripple effects that we don't, obviously when we're acting in anger, it's usually impulsive. It's usually, we haven't thought through it. That's why it's destructive. Pastor Jason talked about being destructive. But we don't think about, he said, we're thinking about ourselves, why I'm mad, why you wronged me. And then when we act on it and we're like, oh, now my kids are embarrassed, my spouse is embarrassed.
Yes.
I'm going to be embarrassed when all the dust settles because I acted crazy. Even some things, Pastor Raphael talked about it one time, and it was in regards to drinking alcohol. And he was talking about how nothing good has resulted from a night of binge drinking or whatever. But even that, anger never leads to a God honor. It never leads in a God honoring direction. It always, if not dealt with appropriately, it's always destructive.
Yeah, and there are cases where destruction may be the only solution, but it's not the preferable one.
It's not the best choice.
It's
just the option.
Very rarely, it's a case where this only can be fixed this way. But even then, we're talking about facing evil with evil. So it doesn't suddenly become, violence doesn't become good because you're doing it for what you think is a good reason. It's still violence. It just may not be, it may be the only recourse because of the degree of violence that is, or wrong that is in the face of it. So ideally, we never have to deal with that. But so David does this. His response, he backs down. She acts as wisdom there, and he responds to it, and we get, oh, David's remarkable in that he was able to be calmed down, which is incredible. So
I also love that example too, because even some of the most godly people I know are not exempt from being angry or, if not met with an Abigail, do things out of anger. Like had she not come to David, how would the story have gone?
Right.
How many times, I'm not immune from doing something out of anger. You're not. Pastor Jason talked about, like, just because people are more mature, like David, even in a man after God's own heart, he still had to deal with anger.
Absolutely.
So, okay, real quick, because we're not going too long yet, but they'll never let me do this podcast again if I go over on time. Some people are probably excited about that.
You should be angry about that.
Angry. Okay, bring it back to the story about Jesus in the marketplace.
Okay, so there are times that anger does rise up. So the story is Jesus is walking through the temple, and he, in this particular case, I would assume, again, notices that there are what is translated as money changers. So in an ideal, that would provide a really useful service. What it seems like that they weren't doing that they were gaining maybe more profit, that they were in a dream world, an ideal, there is a path. If I'm going to the temple, it's to connect with God in some way, and that's more feely than maybe it was done. But this is how I stay connected with him. This is how I express my, maybe not Jewishness, but that I am a child of Abraham. These are the correct responses. And ideally that path happens. And I have in my own life prepped for that. So if I have to bring an ox or something like that, then I've saved that and been able to do that. I've saved the money and I'm bringing it in, and basically I've prepped emotionally and everything else. But what seems to have been created was a hindrance. Basically, here's the extra step that you have to do, and it was unjust. Whatever it is they were doing was unjust. And so the dynamic was a lack of justice, one that then would only affect those who could afford it the least. And it was creating separation between people who should be able to access God, but instead they were keeping them from being able to. And so basically you're exploiting people and the effect is keeping them away from God.
Yeah. Thank you. I don't want, again, like I said, maybe for some of newer believers or just people who are just kind of getting into the word and stuff, they might look at that story and think, oh, well, my actions are justified.
Yeah.
But this is a side note, but an important side note. When we read the Bible in the context of what it was written and what was actually happening at the time, that gives us understanding of why Jesus acted that way. It wasn't it was because they were inhibiting people's access to God, which is not right. So.
Right. And there's a bunch of what ifs you can do there. Why was he particularly on this one? To me, if he's human, then he's also, and he's aware he's getting ready to die. There's a lot going on.
Yeah. There's a lot of emotion there.
But fundamentally, it seems to be that he's responding to an injustice happening to those who can afford it least. And the specific injustices, they're keeping people whom God loves away from God. And for no other reason than profit. And so what should be a house of worship, you've turned into a den of thieves.
Right.
This is, that said, is he graceful and merciful? Utterly so.
Right.
We see two tax collectors, Matthew, the writer of the Gospel of Matthew, and then Levi, not Levi, doesn't matter, it's not going to come at the second, but another tax collector whom Jesus fully accepts. He says, it was Zacchaeus.
I was going to say
Zacchaeus, I'm coming to your house today.
Yeah.
Learn this in
I know that's
first grade, Sunday school. So
I always think of Zacchaeus because he was a wee little man. So I'm always like, how tall was he?
Yeah.
Just curious.
I think we've talked about that, right?
Because I'm like, I bet I was taller than him.
It doesn't say he's a wee little man.
I know.
It doesn't even say that he's short. It simply says he climbs a tree to see. See, I'm getting angry. Oh my gosh. Why? Because I'm short.
Because the short people are given an injustice. No, but that's what I'm saying. The Bible story.
Yeah.
This is another podcast too.
Yeah.
What are we teaching our kids? The three wise men? Anyways, just Zacchaeus was a wee little man.
Yeah.
They assumed that he climbed the tree because he was short.
Yeah, and he may be.
He might
but
be.
There's also a crowd.
He might not be.
Yeah.
Maybe he had long legs so he could climb the tree easier.
Yeah.
Just saying.
He absolutely could have been. So considering their average height, he would have been a pretty small guy. But
just a little guy.
I'd possibly be. I wouldn't be tall, but I wouldn't be.
I would be a giant. They would think I was a Nephilim.
Yeah, exactly right. So.
And then my children, they would look at him like, "Are you here to kill us?"
So to finish out, righteous indignation is rarely, in my mind, righteous. Righteous indignation, if it's true, rarely needs a reaction, because there is two words: reaction and response. The time you need a reaction is when your 3-year-old runs out into the street. It also may be time for a SWAT. I'm not recommending. Right. I'm saying that the cost of action sometimes it can inform us about the degree of severity and time frames and so many things. We can divide it all up. Most things can be responded to rather than reacted to. Response to me takes a breath. It's slow to anger.
I was going to say, it's quick to listen,
it
slow to
tries
speak.
to listen and doesn't just hear the words, but says, what are you actually saying? As you get more mature in that, you start, there is a group of ideas called logical fallacies. I won't go deep into this. And what it means is an assumption that sometimes we make, or things that we kind of do as we're either arguing or explaining or something like that. And by arguing, I don't mean aggression. It can be that, but it doesn't have to be. Now I've lost my train of thought because I'm thinking about logical fallacies. But we can, oh shoot, this is going to be brilliant. It was going to change your life, Sarah. So
please remember.
Help me come back to what my thought was, because it is valuable. So
you're talking about righteous indignation, not typically righteous.
Thinking through ideas. It's this, a straw man is the term for it. It's a straw man fallacy. And it's where I put up the weakest version of an argument, because if I want to fight, give me a straw man to fight. Give me a scarecrow. It can't fight back, and it's incredibly easy to hit. So an example that maybe some of our listeners will understand would be sometimes people are arguing against evolution. And not having read, they argue, well, Darwin did the, well, the current, what you want to answer isn't Darwin's version of evolution, but the current one.
Okay.
To only do Darwin is to do the straw man, is to find the weakest version of it. It's not, if you're arguing with your husband or your kids or something like that, it's not to allow anger to diminish you, where now you're doing the always and everywhere. What you're creating are, well, those are easily beaten. You're creating things that seem like they're big deals and they're not. You just made a giant straw man and it's still weak. So
Jake says that about me.
we want to put, I want to encourage, as we mature, find ways to, what is the person actually saying? What is, what is the other political party actually trying to say? And sometimes they're really wrong and they're saying nothing. But to assume in every single case that the other side is saying nothing is itself wrong.
Yeah.
It's bad thinking. It's weak thinking. Man up, woman up, whatever you want, intellectual up. And it doesn't have to be intellectual. Just challenge yourself that if you think you are reasonable, they also think they're reasonable. You may disagree about that, but they disagree with your sense of reason.
Right.
So what are they actually saying? Slow to listen or quick to listen is, as it gets mature, starts trying to say, how can I understand what you're saying, assuming that you're not absolutely nuts. I may find you are.
Well,
but
yes.
it's not going to help the situation if I assume it.
But even if I completely, after I've listened, I still disagree with you, at least I've heard you out. I haven't reacted in anger. It's okay to disagree.
Yes.
And what you were saying about, in a spouse or whatever, a lot of times if I'm fighting back and forth with Jake, it's not that I'm necessarily mad about what he's saying. It's an underlying issue. Yes. You're not listening. You're not hearing me. You're not listening.
Which is the meme.
Right.
If it's over a 5, it's about something
Bring
else.
that up. Okay, we need to wrap up. But leaving our wonderful listeners, if you're still with us, remember, what will I intentionally think? What will I intentionally say? And what will I intentionally do? Some of the examples that Pastor Jason used about what will I intentionally think, replacing whatever you're thinking isn't true. Is it actually true? Nice. Teach me, show me how to slow down and listen. What will I intentionally say? Sometimes if especially with one of the kids, I'll be like, help me understand why you thought this was the right choice.
That's great.
Help me understand why you thought being late for your curfew was better than, because maybe, I don't know. Maybe he thought he didn't want to maybe he hit every red light on the way home. Yeah. Help me understand. And then one of the things that Pastor Jason talked about was when he will put his hand up to his face, because he says that he'll interrupt people. And so he's trying to be slow to speak, which is funny because a very good friend of mine, her and I, it was born out of the Being Challenge in 2024. And I'll do like this, touch my nose, because it's an actual reminder of me of like, you need to check what you're doing, what you're saying. Are you being quick to listen, slow to speak, it's like it's a very practical way to keep my mind of what I will intentionally think, say, and do.
Yeah.
So
love it.
I thought it was great. So
yeah.
Okay. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for hosting, and you killed it.
You didn't sneeze on me or cough, so I feel like it's a win.
I didn't. The ibuprofen kicked in, I think.
That's why we had to pause, really.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Actually, I do get excited about ideas, and I can power through stuff.
All right. Thanks for joining us today. Come back next week. Tana will be back, and we'll continue our James series. So have a good week, everybody.
See ya.
Thanks again for joining us today. It's a big deal to us that you intentionally bring us into your busy lives each week. Our prayer is that you not only listen to a message week after week, but that you actually learn what it means to live it out day by day, moment by moment. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube or on your favorite podcast platform so others can find us, and tell your friends and family to check us out too. I mean it when I say being with you is one of my most favorite days of the week. Now let's get out there and give away what we're learning about Jesus.